Mike Melito hails from Rochester, New York, where he keeps an active performance, recording, and teaching schedule. In 1997, he released his first of 6 critically acclaimed CDs called My Conception. He has gone on to perform and record with artists such as James Moody, Golson, Cyrus Chestnut, and Jon Faddis. He is on the faculty of Eastman Community Music School and continues to maintain a large private teaching practice. My interview with Mike Melito, next on Drummer Nation.
I absolutely love playing drums, and I couldn't imagine not having that in my life. And I really, if I could help facilitate that and have an impact on your life so that you can play drums, that means the world to me.
Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Bobby A, and today I wanted to tell you about how much I really love the Hudson Music digital app. Okay, now, check it out. It's an app that you can get for your device, and you can purchase books from the Hudson Music digital store and have them stored right on your device. The great thing about it is you always have it with you, and any content that might be video related or music related is right there at your fingertips. It's a wonderful resource.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Drummer Nation, where today I'm delighted to be able to interview drummer Mike Melito. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Hey, good, Michael. How are you?
I'm very well. I've been looking forward to interviewing you for a while, so nice to finally get to this.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this, too.
Now, I know you came from a musical family in Rochester. Tell me a little about your background.
Well, my father was a trumpet player. And he got us, my 2 brothers actually are musicians as well. So he kind of got us into jazz at a very early age. So I think I started hearing it when I was like, just when I was a baby, because he, on up. But, I did kind of go through, it took me till about 12 years old to really get into the music, But I think the first time I really heard Charlie Parker, it freaked me out. So I went out. I remember going to, my dad used to take us to the mall one time a year, like Christmas shopping, so I found this Charlie Parker Miles Davis record playing Dewey Square and it was J.J. Johnson and I bought it for $2, in a drugstore, So I took it home and I just wore the record out. I just was freaking out. Max Roach was on it, So I just became this freak of Bird and Max, and all those guys.
Good start there.
Exactly. So I remember wearing that record out. I remember playing pool in my basement. We had a pool table and just to the point of where my brothers would say, "Man, you're just playing that thing. Can you play a different record, So then I bought an Elvin Jones record, actually, with the one with Dear John C. on it. It was a compilation. It was, and I wore that thing. I was freaked out by Elvin. I was like, wow, I've never heard anything like this in my life. I said, geez, how does he do that? All his polyrhythmic stuff freaked me out. So the drumming actually on all those recordings really got to me, it just how do guys play like that, So it made me very curious about not only how they played like that, but just the music, So so my brothers started teaching me through this process, started teaching me about forms. They would play a 12-bar blues for me and have me count 12 bars and say, okay, this is what a chorus is, this is where it starts, after the 12 bars, the next 4, like that. And so I started to really be enamored by that. So it was challenging for me. So what I did do is I started to do that a lot with that particular record. I forget the record, but it was just maybe it was Charlie Parker playing a blues or something. And so I just started to count through everything. And I tried to hear just the chord progressions eventually stuck in my head. And then I could feel the 12 bars okay, And then same thing, I started to learn I think there was a Dexter Gordon record. It was a live record in Europe, and he does Days of Wine and Roses. So the same thing. I went through that same process with them, and I just started playing. Then I started playing along to them, those records.
Well, you started with the best, man. A lot of drummers don't know that music and don't hear about those drummers till much later on, you know.
Yeah, well, thanks to my dad and my older brother Tom is a drummer in New York, you know, and so he's been there like 30. He's played with just about everybody in New York, so he really took me under his wing, you know, because there's 10 years apart, different. Mm-hmm. So when he was home, he really got me started, and he brought this up like a few months ago. He goes, and I don't remember this, but he goes, I taught you bossa nova beat when you couldn't even sit behind the drums. He goes, you couldn't reach the pedals, but you could play.
Great. But you could play a bossa nova.
Yeah, at like 6 or something. He goes, and I don't remember that, but I remember, you know, I started like playing drumsticks in my hand when I was 4, you know.
Now, as a young kid, you were also enamored of the music of your time, right? I mean, I know that was music of our time, the jazz stuff, but most popular listening from kids was rock and roll.
Right, exactly. So I was familiar with Rush. Was really big during the day, you know, was really big that, and so I actually would listen to Neil Peart, you know, and would think, oh man, you know, I was actually pretty enamored by him because I thought, wow, you know, you're hearing the stuff in Seven and at the time, you know, some of the stuff, Tom Sawyer and all that stuff, and you're thinking, wow, you know, that did hit me. It did actually made an impression, you know.
Mm-hmm. So, wow. That's a nice jump from a jazz player, but I'm talking also about, you know, a Keltner kind of groove, or just just sure. Backbeat stuff, Motown, Stax.
Well, you know, growing up in Rochester, you know, Steve Gadd's from here.
Mm-hmm.
So Steve's from here. So he was a huge. Then I started to get into him really, really big. You know, from that, and like Chicory of Friends. That record came out, and I think I wore that thing out like.
I think every Gaddism is on that record. I think
absolutely.
It's one of his greatest.
It really is, you know. Yeah. And so I remember him. My father took me to see him. Oh, it was 13 or 14. He was playing with his own quartet here, which had George Young, the saxophone player. Eddie Gomez was playing bass, and Warren Bernhardt was playing piano. And so they were playing straight ahead. You know, all straight ahead stuff. And I remember he would play stuff with the brushes. I remember it's the first guy I ever heard play the brushes that sounded as loud as sticks. He got such a big sound. And I was like, wow. So that stuck with me. So I'm like, wow, the brushes. So I haven't really gotten to the brushes yet. So I was like trying to get go home and get a pair of set of brushes, try to do it. And I just couldn't, you know, obviously couldn't do it, you know. So,
but the cool thing is you're starting drums at the right spot. You're listening to the great players, and you're focused on the sound,
right?
Which comes as an afterthought to so many young drummers, possibly because it's so hard to tune a drum.
Absolutely, I think you're right. You know,
just to develop the ears to hear that it's even tempered all the way around, even tensioned. It's hard for kids, and also you had probably good gear too. You're a lot of young guys trying to play sensitive music. Sorry, I bumped the mic. Sensitive music, and they don't have the right stuff for that.
Right. No, absolutely. I think you're right. You know, yeah, I did have good gear. I mean, yeah, I did have some good gear. You know, I had some Gretsch drums. You know, a bigger set of drums, but it's still. I remember Evans. He used to. I think Gadd used to use Evans hydraulics and then clear ambassadors on the bottom. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong. But so I went and got those exact, you know, heads and tried to tune the drums the exact same way he did. Mm-hmm. And I remember trying to figure out some of the stuff he did, and then and I a little bit I could obviously, but it was way over my head. And then you know, there was a saxophone player here who was really one of Steve's musical fathers, who hired me for my first jazz gigs. You know,
who's that?
Joe Romano.
Oh yeah, sure.
Playing Buddy's band and Woody's band. He played with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So he hired me when I was like 16. So, you know, I started just, you know, and it was really amazing. Well, how that started too, I have to say, I'd have to credit the vibraphonist Joe Locke, you know.
Keep going, because that was my next question. Pretty soon, as a teenager, you started doing gigs.
Right.
Tell me more about that.
Well, when I was 15, I want to say, or 16, Joe Locke was a good friend of my brother Tom's. They used to do a lot of gigs around here when they both lived in town here. So they were real close. So Joe used to come over and hear me play, and he used to try to get me out to play, just sit in. And I said, no, Joe, I'm not good enough to do that. I can't. I was just terrified of making mistakes and having everybody hate me, and just like, so he goes, look, if you really, he said, both my brother and him said, look, if you want to play music, if that's what you want to do for, a living, you got to play. I mean, you're going to have to go out and fall on your face. He goes, or else you just forget it. They told me it straight. They just said, look, forget being a musician. So kind of ticked me off a little bit. I was like, man, I'm only 15, and you guys are, but they were telling me the truth, which is what you need to hear,
Everyone needs their ass handed to them a few times.
Absolutely.
And as you start gigging, it will find your weaknesses,
Absolutely. So
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, you came up I think you have to have gear, you have to have a development of sound, you have to listen, you have to practice, and then you have to work.
Right.
And you don't get anything from the others that would live without the others. You know what I'm saying?
No, exactly.
Absent any one of those three, you find yourself in trouble.
No, you're right.
But that's great to get that experience as a teenager.
Yeah. I mean, so there was this, I saw the phone rang one Friday night. And so I remember I answered it. It was Joe Locke. He goes, look, I need a drummer for my drummer bailed tomorrow. Can you play? I go, well, yeah, I'm free, but I don't think I'm good at it. He goes, look, you're playing tomorrow at 9 o'clock. At Foggy's Notion. That was the name of the club. He goes, and I'll see you. I'll see you there. Click.
That's what you
so I'm like freaking out. I'm like, man, what am I? Couldn't sleep. I was like,
how old were you?
15.
So you're not really old enough to be in the club.
Exactly. So my dad, who was a cop, my mother took me to the gig, and my dad was a cop, and he came and picked me up because I think he was playing too. So he came and picked me up after his gig. So yeah, I'm in there and I'm playing. So I remember the first tune we played was Autumn Leaves, and so Joe explained. He goes, "Okay, now with Autumn Leaves, we're gonna go boom boom." Then you'll hear it. So I did it, and the first tune I was terrified. I got a little, but I loosened up after that.
Mm-hmm.
Then I had such a good time after I actually just forgot about like being scared, because
Right.
I was having so much fun in that first tune. I got looser. I said, oh man, I could do this,
There you
so,
go.
So
you realize they're not going to boil you in oil and eat you. It's a gig. You're going to get through the other side and keep a good attitude, and it's all going to work out.
Exactly, and I just found myself having so much fun that I became fearless, like even during that gig, I just started to open up a lot more and just started to really just hit the drum, and so Joe Romano was in the club that night. It was actually, that was his regular gig he had with Joe Locke, and so he came in after and he heard me play, and so he called me over. He goes, and he knew my dad really well, and he goes, so man, he goes, you sound great. He goes, I want to hire you for like I have a 2-month stint coming up at the club for 3 nights. Can you do it? And I said, yeah, I'd love to do it, but I have to check with my parents,
That's cool.
So it was a Thursday and Thursday through Saturday gig. My parents wouldn't let me do the Thursday because it was a school night.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I did Friday and Saturdays for 2 months, and that was huge. I learned more of that. I never went to college, but that was my college.
Right.
Was being able to play with those guys, because I learned so much, and I learned so much about there was times when I would tunes I didn't know, I would write down. I'd bring a notepad. Okay, I don't know this tune. Don't know this tune.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go home and I try to learn it for next week.
Do your homework, yeah.
Yeah. So I do that, and then so I got through that. Those two, and I had a ball, and then Bill Dobbins started to call. He called me, So actually, one time. Go ahead.
Were you studying privately at the time from somebody, or just your brothers?
Well, my brother and I studied with this great orchestral drummer, John McNeil, who played in our local orchestra. Mm-hmm. And so at the time, and I was telling him about this too, because I was studying with him at the time, and I had a lesson on that Saturday, the day of that gig. And I was going to tell him how terrified I was. He goes, look. He goes, the same thing. He says, Just go do it. Try to have fun with it. It doesn't matter. You're not. You're 16. You're not. Nobody's expecting you to go out there and play Philly Joe. Just go do your best. So that was helpful to hear from him. So,
sure. I always tell the student, if I have a young student, I say, I got one rule, man. You got to follow this rule or it's not going to work. And they get all wide-eyed and I say, the rule is you got to have fun.
Right.
That's why we're doing this, right?
Absolutely. I tell my students the same thing,
You know that story Peter Erskine tells about taking a lesson and he was all nervous and he's told to, of course he'll tell the story. It's his story. He'll tell it better than me. But he's told to take a piece of music, the snare drum piece, I think it was, and play it completely wrong. Everything backwards, upside down, wrong dynamics. Just mess it up as best as you can. And he does it. And then the teacher says, well, look out the window. You see anything different out there? Everything seemed like it was before. The sun is shining. People are going about their business. So yeah. I said, okay, there you go.
Yeah, I did hear that. That was I did see that, Peter. I saw that video.
Lesson learned, man.
That's a big lesson learned,
Yeah. So reading came into the picture at some point. That was from your snare drum teacher? Or was he a snare drum teacher or a drum set guy?
Well, he was both, actually.
Okay.
But I started to read, actually, before because I started lessons in my school lessons. And I started out of the Roy Burns book,
Oh, yeah.
the elementary drum method book. So I actually started that. My brother taught me how to read a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I got with Jon, he was an incredible reader. He got me more and more into reading, So we went through all the classic books, the
Right.
Wilcoxon books, the Anthony Cerrone book. A lot of books.
They're on my stand right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Funny how those books never age,
No, they don't. I still teach out of all of them.
I do too. I tell the kids, look at the date on that book. And tell me what you think has to happen for people to still be using it 50 years later.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, how many years can we live in the stick control book,
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Never get old. Never get tired.
Never gets old.
All right. So at some point you began teaching too?
Yeah, I started to teach when I was about 22. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was about 22, I started to teach. And I actually started with 8 students. And so I built my from there, I went all the way up to 60 at one point. I had
that's
60 students. And so now I have between 35 and 45, which is just about the right amount of students for me, So
I used to do that. I had 45.
Yeah.
That's like 4 full days of teaching.
Yeah, so I'm up to 6. Right now I do 6 days, but it's not 6 full days.
Right.
But it's 6 days of teaching, So it's probably around 40, 45 students,
Mm-hmm. Now you're teaching online these days?
I teach online for now, yeah.
Was that something that you had to tackle, or were you comfortable in that setting? This whole media production thing is not what we signed up for when we got a snare drum and a pair of sticks.
Right. Yeah, I found the transition to be pretty easy, actually. I mean, it took a minute. I mean, I should say it took a second to get used to, having the hands. I always want to see everybody's hands. Sometimes they're showing me their face. I go, no, I got to see the snare drum. I want to see what you're doing when I call a 9-stroke roll. I want to see if you're letting go with your back fingers or you're using your arms like a robot, So, but it actually became pretty easy. It's not the optimal way to teach, but it's actually, I've learned a lot from it,
Me too. It's not that bad. It's pretty comfortable once you get used to it.
Yeah, it is. It's not that bad at all, And some of my students, I have some students that live, I a couple hours away, So
that's another great thing about it. Your students could be anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's instead of trying to come in 2 hours, which they used to do, I can teach them, this way. And so I'll probably stick to this way of teaching till the fall, and then I'll probably go back to my in-person. But it'll probably be a combination,
Right. Now, we're going to jump around and catch other parts of your career. You were gigging, and were you at college ever? Did you do a degree thing for music or study that way?
Never went to college for music. I just started gigging and teaching right out of the gate. So I really just was so busy. I didn't need to.
Right.
I didn't need to go to.
Now, nothing wrong with that. Now, you also made a choice to be a band leader too. You have a lot of recordings out under your name.
Right.
That's a great thing that so many drummers. I've never done that. I know so many drummers who just are sidemen their whole lives and never really take that jump. What was the thinking behind that?
Well, I have to credit a great piano player here, Paul Hoffman, who really insisted that he goes, you got to do your own. Why don't you do your own record? He goes, because I was already like at that point on some sidemen records, and he goes, it's always good to do your own thing because you do it your own way. You pick the musicians you want to pick. And I said, well, who's gonna buy? So he says, So I said, all right, I should do it. So. On my first record, it's funny, I had like Ralph Alama on it, Grant Stewart, John Snyder, Joe Magnarelli, and Paul Gill, and Paul Hoffman played. So it's, pretty much an all-star cast. Those guys are incredible. Yeah. So, and I remember doing it, I remember just having such a good time with it, and those guys were really, really easy to work with, So I just had such a good time with it. I said, okay. I always felt, though, I could do better. So I would go on and I said, I'm going to do another one. So I did another one, I said, okay. And then from that, though, Michael, what happened was I started to get a lot of, actually, that's my students started coming, because started to get a lot of airplay around here, a lot, and more, a lot of profile, So, right. So then from there, I said, okay, I'm just going to, I was doing other people's records at the time, and I was getting better.
Yeah, you have an impressive resume.
Yeah. So I was saying, I'm getting better. So, for me, anybody that knows me, this is my whole thing is, and that's the great thing about our Zoom Tuesday night hangs that we do,
By the way, we do a Zoom thing that's a bunch of educators, basically, jazz educators, drummers, but they're some of the best in the world. I'm honored to be a fly on the wall.
Yeah, well, me too. It's great to, but even that, it's great to be around. And I've known a lot of those guys for a long time, so it's been great to be able to. Kenny Washington, especially, I've known so long, and we've hung out a bunch and we've talked a lot and for 25 years now, I think, at least.
I tell Kenny, man, I know my jazz history. I've taught it at the university level several times, and
right.
And I don't know anything compared to where he's at.
Well, as he says on the drum, he goes, I go, Kenny, I've always told him, man, there's no stumping you. I mean, I pull every record I mention. Oh, yeah, that too. Do you hear the eights that Philly Joe played on that? This is, and when I was with him, if there's something, too, the thing is with Kenny, too, he's like a student. Everybody on that Zoom meeting that we do, and they're all well-known drummers, some of the greatest in the world, really consider themselves students for life, That's the one thing I get from everybody. Everybody's so humble on that thing. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows they're students for life,
Well, you have to be humble no matter who you are when you look across the panel and you're looking at some of those guys, Harold right. Jones, and how are you going to cop an attitude with a guy like that? He's right. a legend,
exactly. And there's respect that obviously when he came on, that everybody, Kenny's asking questions. Everybody's asking, it's like the Harold Jones hour, and it was, and it was great because Harold's so humble.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm just saying, I think for me though, I guess I always say, getting a chance to play with some of the masters, I think really those guys were, and getting to meet some, like I met Billy Higgins a few times and talked to him, and he was just saying, he would talk about Philly Joe and Kenny Clark like they were, that's the guy.
His heroes. Yeah, they all had their heroes. Everybody we had, who were our heroes, had their heroes.
They had their heroes. So they go, oh no, there's always like Kenny Klute, that's the guy, not me. I'm not, so that taught me big lessons too, to where it's always, you listen to those, there's nothing that's going to beat, all those guys. Fluke and Papa, that's, to me, that's the top of that's it.
Well, let's talk about the style of your CDs. Your music is, sounds like you may be a little bit aware of the Blue Note catalog.
Yes. Yes, I'm a big Blue Note guy. I love that.
Yeah, I love that stuff. So what do we call that? Post bop or something? A hard bop?
Yeah, hard bop.
Yeah. Okay, call it hard bop. What are some of the characteristics of hard bop? Because we have people watching of all different backgrounds.
Well, I think really bebop and hard bop are pretty similar. Like, I think, the bebop, the melodies were a little faster, I think in hard bop, for me, it was a little bit more blues drenched, And I think that, I don't want to say more lyrical, but some of the melodies you could sing a little bit easier. Like,
That's a good point.
You know what I'm saying? So, like,
Sure.
If you take a Tina Brooks tune, Tina Brooks was a great saxophone player, or Hank Mobley, he's probably a little bit more known, and you kind of can sing through High and Flighty or one,
That's a good point. Moaning versus ornithology,
Right, exactly. I was thinking ornithology, yeah, too. That was great. You mentioned that. So, yeah. So, you right?
Yeah.
Or Kind of Blue. Kind of Blue's I think it's the biggest selling jazz record of all time.
I think it is.
I could be wrong, but the reason why is a melody, like, so what? Right? So so even people that don't like that really might not be huge jazz fans have that record in their collection. I've been to friends of mine who aren't musicians, and they have that record, or CD or whatever.
Yeah, one of the ones that pop up, like Take Five or Time Out.
Yeah, Time Out.
Yeah, they're accessible.
Yeah, exactly.
To non-jazz files, audio files. So you're teaching now at a university. Where do you teach?
Well, actually, I teach at Eastman. I teach it in the Eastman Community Music School, which is not Rich Thompson, our good friend. He teaches at the college, and I do the community music. So,
and are those mostly adults or children?
Well, actually, it's a combination. It's mostly, I say it's a 50-50, and then and I. Yeah, so, and I've been there like probably a good 5-6 years now, because they had like a drum thing there, but they didn't really have many students, so they wanted to really hire like a couple of guys to do it. So I have an intern and then it's me. So they wanted to take more, make it a little more really, really serious about it. So
beautiful. Well, I'm going to ask you the question I ask all the jazz educators.
Sure.
Which is, the industry has changed dramatically. There's considerably less work than there ever was, I think.
Oh, yes.
And these kids are coming out of school, mentoring with great drummers like you and the others we've discussed. Where are they going to work?
Well, you know what? I think there's always going to be, from what I see, I have a couple students who go to Purchase, and they study with Kenny, but they study with me like in the summer. And, I've discussed this with them, but they have a whole group of their friends, and there's a lot of young people out there, I think, who really love the music. And really, these guys are they call with questions. I had a 2-hour lesson with one of the students who goes to Purchase the other day. He's asking me all these questions about Lex Humphrey, all these guys, like the drummers, the music. How do you do this? What do you do? What are you thinking about here? So I think and they practice, and these guys were great when they left me, So I think there's there actually is a bigger audience out there than we think for the straight ahead jazz, at least, But I think I think as long as that's there, I think the music will always be there in some form, It's not what it was when I was there. When I used to play a lot more, but I still actually work. I've actually worked through the pandemic a little bit,
Good for you.
I'm starting to get a lot more gigs now. So I've had 3 gigs the last couple weeks, So,
beautiful.
But it goes in waves.
Well, the focus is on education or the music at hand. What happens in the music industry is nothing your teacher can anticipate or really respond to. We just have to keep playing And there's a difference between will the music survive? Of course it will, and keep moving, and will your local workaday gigs stay around? That's a different question.
Well, exactly. I mean, where I live, there's really no bona fide jazz clubs here.
Yeah, same here.
So there's just there's a few little rooms there's supposedly one that's going to open up, I'm told, which would be great. But it's just, there's some restaurants, Then there's I do like some gigs just playing jazz in assisted living places. And we just play standards, and the people, older people, they love like all the they can sing, they sing the lyrics,
Mm-hmm.
And it's great. We play for an hour, and it's like they love it,
My son's a guitar player. He does a bunch of those.
He
does
okay.
chord melody stuff. And,
he does. Okay.
And he loves it. They're very appreciative. And the gig's over in an hour, and they're in the afternoons.
Exactly. So does he live in Atlanta?
Yeah, he lives here, and
okay.
He's moving to Nashville.
Oh, he is? Okay.
As soon as this he writes tunes and all that. But I'm interviewing you.
It's all.
Appreciate you asking about my son. But,
it's always nice.
I listen back to some of these interviews and I say, why don't I just shut the fuck up and listen
to these guys? No, man.
Listen to these cats talk.
No, I love to hear about others too.
All right, so what's coming up?
So, what I have coming up is, I have a private gig coming up this Sunday I'm playing. I just did a gig the other day, it was a gig in this movie theater that we have in town. It's an arts theater. So that was a lot of fun. And that was sold out, which was great. But what's coming up is I have this private gig on Sunday, and I'm doing this gig at this place called the Penthouse, which is, they have a weekly jazz, or actually a monthly series on Wednesday nights. So that's like a 6 to 9 gig, And then I have a couple of private, a lot of private stuff coming up. That's the public thing I have coming up. And then I have a couple of public things coming up in August, I think.
People don't realize that a lot of the gigs musicians do are invisible, right?
Right, yeah.
You're either in the studio or you're working a party or a private event or something that's invisible.
Exactly, yeah. And that's what a lot I'm doing, So
when I lived in LA, I was surprised to see how few of those guys you could actually see out and about in the clubs. They would do jazz clubs at night, to pay their bar tab and hang out after being in the studios all day.
Well, it's fun. My brother was really good friends with Vernell Fournier. They were really close, And Vernell,
great drummer.
Yeah, one of my heroes and one of my brother's heroes. And I mean, they used to hang out during the day. And when Vernell used to drive a cab, He worked at Sears for 20 years in Chicago, I mean, one of the greatest drummers that's ever walked the planet. And so, my brother used to tell me, he goes, Vernell used to come into these gigs I used to play. And I used to ask him, why am I on this gig, and not you? And he used to say, Vernell was be driving a cab. He goes, you know what? That's just the way it is. He goes, as long as you're working, and that's great. And he goes, and he used to say, he goes, just sound good. That's what he used to say. Just sound good.
Good advice.
But he used to go to his house, and I remember him telling me, because I learned a lot from his stories with Vernell, And Vernell, actually, I do have to mention this guy's name, because he was a huge influence on me. Is this drummer named Ray Mosca, who nobody knows about this guy. He's an underground guy, but man, he's on
I've heard his name, but that's all.
Yeah, well, Ray used to play with, he was with George Shearing for years. He was with Oscar Peterson for years. He actually played with Ahmad. He was Vernell's sub in Ahmad's trio. This guy was that. In fact, Vernell said, I wish I had the career that Ray had. He goes, I wish I had that career. And this guy was probably, I was talking with Benny Green about this not too long ago, because, Benny and I are friends, and, I said, Ray Mosca, and he knows who Ray was, but he goes, Hank Jones used to say Ray was one of the drummers he worked with the most in his career, but he's an underground guy. So But Ray showed me a lot of stuff that Papa Joe's a student of Papa Joe's, you know. And it was tough love, man. It was like, you get in there and it was like, you lean this way. Papa Joe would take your head and smash it into the hi-hat if he was here. You ever seen you lean like that? What are you doing? Stand up straight.
That's good. Straight. Drummers stoop, you know. Even Buddy had it, you know. All leaned over. He had back problems, too. Jeff Hamilton was my teacher, and he would walk behind me, pull my shoulders back.
Oh, would he? Would Jeff do that? Yeah.
Well, in a lesson, yeah. You know, ears over shoulder over backside, right?
Right. Exactly.
But we don't do that. We don't do it.
Right.
The drums kind of pull you forward.
They do.
And everybody does that.
Exactly. No, absolutely. You know,
not everybody. Look at Joe Jones, man. He was so pretty.
Papa Joe was just
sat up there, immaculate looking.
Oh yeah, and Ray was actually Papa Joe, like a protege of Papa Joe's. I mean, this guy could play. He doesn't play much anymore, but man, I've never heard anybody play the brushes like this in my life. I mean, I've heard a lot of great brush play, but nothing like that. This guy, you know.
Wow. Well, one thing I get from those greats is a sense of joy in their music.
Oh yeah.
And I got that from you too. I appreciate that when I see it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And hear it. And the thing is, if you see it, you hear it. It's they're all mixed together. You know.
Yes. Well, I mean, I love to play at more than. I mean, I really do. I mean, you know, we do this because we love it so much. You know.
And don't you think you sound how you look to a certain extent?
Yes.
I don't mean you sound different if you have blue eyes or brown, but you know, if you play like that, that's how you sound.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, you look at Mel Lewis. You know, Mel was so relaxed, like when he played. He was like, you know, just everything was just like he was looking at the wall. Like when you were playing, all this stuff would become. I mean, the energy and everything would just be like this. You know.
I saw Mel Lewis video I saw where it's just his face and he's burning, man, and he's sitting there looking like he's in church. You know, he's just.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Tipping, right? What's tipping?
yeah, tipping, man. I just that ride cymbal, man. Ding it, you know. You feel that ride cymbal through the music, you know.
Yeah, and those guys had all that passion and enthusiasm and energy, but it never got past, you know, right there.
Yeah, they all very relaxed, you know. Obviously, Jeff being like, you know, being a Mel freak, he reminds me of Mel in a lot.
Oh yeah, he's a Mel freak.
You know, and just because he's just. You watch him and you see him do a clinic or you just watch him with the snare drum, you know, and everything's just like so easy, you know, and
it's supposed to be easy, right?
Right, exactly, absolutely.
They say that composition gets harder as you get older, but playing gets easier. Buddy said playing got easier.
Oh, did he say that? Wow, I never heard that from him.
Yeah. Stands to reason, right? You learn to conserve your energy. You learn to play within yourself and all that stuff.
Well, I agree with that, you know, because there's a lot of videos I've seen of myself 20, 30, even 20 years ago, and it's so much. Since watching those videos, and I videotape myself now a lot, and man, it's great to see how you're playing, like and how if you're, you know, because I always tell my students I want to see wrist. I don't want like arm motion, and when you go to hit a cymbal, I don't want two motions to the cymbal. One motion. I want, you know, just everything like this. Yeah. You know, I want the going from the floor tom. I want these movements. You know, so I don't want like the dealing a deck of cards. I don't want like this. You know, and so, but you know, you have to go through, and you have to go and you do this for a long time. You have to watch yourself, and I have mirrors. Like I have a mirror right there where I watch myself. You know, all the time. Yeah. Yeah.
Great practice with a mirror. Nowadays with like Zoom, you know, this is my practice in teaching in the interview studio. I just hit record and go play. And it's such a beneficial thing, especially during COVID.
Oh, it is. It definitely is. Yeah, because, you know, without the gigs, you know, to try to stay, you know, I play along to record like records every day. Like, you know, I have Philly Joe records and Max and Elvin and every day, like probably that's for at least an hour. You know, that's part of my practice.
Got to stay ready to drive the bus.
Yeah, exactly. And plus, you know, to get the other thing is I have my students do it. So, and the reason why I have my students do it is because I'm trying to get them to get the feel of some of the feel of those guys, you know, because the cymbal beat and all that stuff, you really can't. You can tell somebody about it, but they got to feel that. And you know, the only way to really get that is through really. For me, is playing with great musicians. Like I said, I've been blessed to play with some of the greatest. You know, but you know, and you feel when you feel like one guy I played with a lot was James Moody. You know, and so when I played with Moody, he had such a big sound and a big beat. You know, sitting next to him. But you know, he didn't have. He had a hard time. Hearing. He really wanted a hitting behind him. You know, so but I would ask. We had dinner every night. I remember for a month. You know, and it was great every night. And I'd ask him all these questions. You know, and the one thing I said, you know, when you really learn how to play this music, not just from, from him it was a different era, but for me, you know, I always just would spend. Since I was a kid, playing to Philly Joe records and the Max, all the guys at Lex Humphreys and Al Harwood, you know, all my heroes, and that's how I developed my cymbal beat, you know, and there was some great bass players I got to play with, like older bass, it was great. I got to play with older musicians as a kid who really they didn't say anything to me. I used to play with this great bass player Barney Mallon, who had the biggest beat and he used to play with everybody, but was just settled in Rochester, you know. But man, just a wide quarter note, and just you get right in there, and it's just all the space you feel, and you know. And you couldn't help. He improved my cymbal beat. I give credit him like 100%.
Without saying a word, right?
Without saying anything to me, you know. And he used to say, so Barney, I used to ask him. He goes, man. You're doing all the right stuff you're doing. You just got to keep doing it. Just keep doing what you're doing, and don't listen to these people that talk about like pushing and bashing and you know on every. You don't music doesn't call for that. When you're playing tunes, let the music play. Let the music, you know, do the talking for you. But let the tempos play themselves. You know, so if you do that, you're going to be in great shape.
Well, Mike, it's been great getting to know you better. Website is what?
MikeMelito.com.
And people want to contact you or study with you can find you there?
You can find me there. There's videos of me playing from all kinds of videos there. There's clips of my CDs. And everything you want to know about me is there.
It's a good site. I was just on it.
Yeah, thank you.
Any words of wisdom to wrap up?
Well, you know, the best words of wisdom I think for any musician now is don't give up. You know, we're in a period of where I know a lot of people that have moved out of New York. A lot of well-known guys have moved out of New York, and it's not like they've totally given up on music, but you know, it's like they're starting to get into other things, which is good. You got to eat, but you know, we all have to just keep, you know, a camaraderie. I think musicians really need to be together, stick together. And really never give up playing, and never give up, because I think I think the more and more that you just do that, you know, I think we have a better chance of surviving and helping the music survive and us surviving. And plus, we do this because we love it, and you have to remember that, you know. I think that's the most important thing. That's, you know, I practice like a maniac and I have a heavy teaching schedule and everything. I still practice. I spend like, I'll say this, I spend probably an hour, at least an hour at 11 o'clock till midnight. You'll see me down practicing Wilcoxon on my pad, you know. So it's just, you just have to keep a positive attitude, try to stay happy and healthy and take care of yourself. And if you do that, I think, you know, you're going to be in good shape.
Great words of wisdom from Mike Melito at MikeMelito.com. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Let's hang when this whole thing opens up.
I'd love to.
All right, brother. Take care.
All right. Take care.